Okay, so this has started. First of all, I would like to welcome Nikolai Dechen Alirapstan Singhe, who's Professor Emeritus of Linguistics and a researcher in languages from 9 different families, and has almost a 40-year record of research in Bhoti and Tibetic languages, which could be one and the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And so it's my absolute pleasure to have you with me and to have known you for last 6-7 years, having had so many interactions and conversations with you about everything. This is the first time it's getting recorded, but thank you so much for doing this.
Jule Yatole, Salam Alaikum, Omer Saab, Man Baut Kushi Hai, Matat Poyat Nirandi, Jarte Lomon Poson. So I'm very happy to have some recorded interview with you, and we know each other for a number of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would just want to start with a very simple question about how you started or got interested into languages and in Tibetic languages in particular.
So it started very early in my childhood. I had a fascination for music and for sounds and for languages. So it started quite early, and I was lucky enough to be able to travel as a teenager and then to study in different countries in Canada and Soviet Union, and make research in China, in Tibet, like for more than 20 years, and also in Central Asia, in Tajikistan, etc. So yeah, I was very lucky to be able to get training in different areas, including Australia, work in South America as well. And my interest for the Tibetic languages began quite early when I was a teenager. And it was linked in the beginning with more philosophy.
How did you get introduced? Like, what was the first contact or sort of?
The first contact, I met some Tibetan refugees in France and in Canada. That was the first contact, because as you know, Tibet now is no longer an independent country. It's the neighbor, your neighbor here, only 200 kilometers from here. And so, so I met the Tibetan refugees, and I was quite interested in the philosophy and the language, the poetry, and getting more and more. And when I first began, that was 45 years ago, or no, even now, 45 years ago, I had, like most Europeans, the idea that there was only one Tibetan language. We had no idea of the diversity and the incredible depth of this culture. Like in Tibet is already, we said Tibetan, but in fact it's very diverse, because between Dzongkha, Kham, Amdo, huge differences in the language, even in the habit, in the food, everything. And of course in Ladakh is a crossroad. Your mother tongue is a Tibetic language, is a Bhoti language, but it's influenced also by the Turkic, Iranians, and of course Indo-Aryan nowadays, Urdu, etc. So it is a fantastic crossroad, and for this, it makes it very interesting. It's unique. The music is unique. Like when you listen to Ladakhi music, you have the Daman and Surna, which come directly from Iran. But then you have the Dramnien and all that comes, and the Kobang that comes directly from Tibet. And this is what I like also here. Apart from, the variety of culture, of course, the environment, which I was since I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I was fascinated by mountains also.
Okay, and I know precisely you started in 85 with the languages.
And in Ladakh, that's the thing. That's the first time I came to the Himalayas When I was
as a younger
young researcher,
Nikolai.
young scholar, I was writing my beginning of my PhD at the time and of master, and that's the first time I came. And at that time, it was a real discovery in Thailand. And of course, Ladakh was so different from what it is now. That is a touristic place. It was really the beginning, and it had still a lot of things of the ancient society.
So what are the differences that you're seeing, linguistically, culturally, physically?
In Ladakh?
Yeah, in Ladakh, because like you said, it started there,
No.
And I know you've spent large amount of time in Tibet and in other places in Central Asia, even in South America, and so many.
Right.
You've researched 9 families, so there's a lot of work that you've been able to accomplish. But
yeah, well, the culture has undergone a massive change, as I would say, as in the rest of the world, except that here it goes faster. Why? Because when I first came, and let's say if you go back to the 70s or the 60s, basically very few roads, no means of communication. So Ladakh was really unlocked in so many ways, and so
Silk Road was also closed. No out.
Of course, and the mountain pass. I mean, during winter, you had to live in a traditional way. The kolak was the main food. 2 generations. I mean, that was not in '85, but one generation. I know, for instance, a spawn from Lukil or Likir. Yeah, whatever you pronounce it. But Lu is the water spirit.
Linguistics coming in.
Anyway, he told me that when he was young, they were not eating even rice. When you go, you had to wash, you had to consult an umpo, an astrologer, what time to wash your hair. I mean, that is not so long ago. That is, 50 years or 60 years ago. This society has been totally changed. And all these changes happen, everywhere in the world, except that here it didn't take 2-3 centuries. It took less than 50 years. So when you have an incredible change in, let's say, in Western Europe or even in Eastern Europe, but it took place over a long time. And here, but still people have kept, they've kept a lot of elements despite these changes. So they're Buddhist and Muslim faith. So they kept it, and they kept it in the way that it was. Of course, Buddhism is very special to Ladakh, and Muslim is also adapted, is also because it has been practiced by Bhoti people. So they still have, this kind of Lato practice, like Shuksang, Tashuk, etc., the juniper, the divine juniper. And of course, these are not canonic Muslim practices, just as the Buddhist practices are not canonic Buddhist. If you look at the Buddhism in Thailand or in other places in India, it's entirely different. Yeah, a lot of things are different. Yeah.
Okay, and so you started really young, and you also went to Tibet. You lived there for a long time, and so how has it been being able to research for this long period? Because you could have chosen something else. Also, you could have done something. Did that ever arise, or what kept you in it? What was?
No, I certainly was. The fact that I had this access to a lot of languages, I could have made a lot of money, much more than as a university professor, even full professor. But I chose it just because I loved it. And nowadays, to have a work, make research about things you love is such a luxury. So, the thing is, this culture, your culture, is so rich that you have. I was first interested in the language because I'm a linguist. That is my prism, the prism through which I'm looking at the world in so many ways. But you could talk about, about the astrology, astronomy. You could talk about medicinal plants, for instance, which is something which really fascinates me. And the medicine, the Suaripa, is very developed and it is a whole tradition which is different from Ayurvedic, and it's the different also from the Zhongyi, the Chinese medicine. So it has its own, of course, plants, unique features, and the architecture. Look at even, the houses in Leh, although lots of things have been destroyed, there are so many new hotels and stuff like that. But the architecture is fantastic. And even the Sunni mosque the Arghon mosque is very beautiful. And it's something that doesn't exist in any other Muslim country. It simply doesn't exist.
What about Central Asia? Maybe there?
No, because in Tajikistan you share a lot of features because they have Perti, they have yaks, they have those, and they have like rangtak, like the water mills.
Yeah.
Very, very similar.
It's supposed to have come from Baltistan to Leh.
Right, yeah.
So it's there in Tajikistan.
Even as far as Tajikistan, yes, as far as Dushanbe and the area, especially the Pamir. The Pamir shares a lot of things, and before the political problems, a geopolitical problem that prevents all this region to interact, because the Tibetan would, and of course the Ladakhi would go to Tibet immediately if it was open, and the Tibetan would come here immediately as well, just because. But to go also to Tajikistan, Afghanistan, because it was at some part during history, at some point it was part of the Tibetan Empire. So you see why there are some remnants of the empire. So there's these common features are there. It's a high altitude environment that plays, of course, a significant role. But there are things that are many things that are unique. I find in the culture and in the way people are. Yeah.
Okay, so I was earlier talking with one researcher sticking to Central Asia and Ladakh and obviously Tibet, and how these regions are connected in terms of language.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be like your very readings on that front? And because this researcher, he's a Ladakhi researcher, Dr. Tamchus.
Right.
He said like Ladakh is actually the southern part of, let's say, the Central Asia historically.
Yeah, that's things very often overlap.
Yes.
So basically, from a strictly linguistic point of view, you speak a Tibetic language that is derived from Old Tibetan.
Okay.
Old Tibetan belong to this mega family. We called it macro family, which is Sino-Tibeto-Burman, I would say, to put it simple, which is a big family of 500 languages. It's like Indo-European, when you have, Indo-Aryan languages, Greek, the Romance languages, Slavic, Germanic languages, etc. So it's a huge family. But within this family, there is like a huge tree, and within this tree, there is a huge branch, which is the Tibetic languages. And the Tibetic languages now, they have more than 50, actually. To be more precise, we have counted about 76 languages, different languages. They are all derived from the Old Tibetan. Yeah, that's why it's so easy. You go to Kargil, you pronounce every letter. So the Kargili should really write as they did, only 1 century or 2 centuries ago, write in Tibetan, because they can write everything. Like if they say, honey, here it has changed, Rangsi, in Lhasa Rangsi, but in Kargil, Zbrangsi. So they pronounce exactly as
the most archaic.
Absolutely, and Balti to a certain extent too. Now this is only the.
But this is Purigi.
Purigi. Yeah. Now this is only the language, but if you take into account the cultural influence, then of course there is a lot of Central Asia here, because this country, has been invaded by different groups during the history, and the Kinars and even the earlier empires also coming from Central Asia, and so there are a lot of archaeological traces of that, and then of course Islam came through Central Asia, Iran and Tajikistan, and coming here, Afghanistan. So there is there is a Central Asian part in it, and of course it was a big, road trade road towards Yarkand, towards the Turkestan, that the Chinese now call Xinjiang, which means new border, because it's of course not Chinese at all. It is Turkic, just as it's a completely different culture. But yeah, of course there is a flavor. So when you are in Baltistan, I had the chance to go to Skardo, Shigar, Khaplu, etc. When Rongyul, and when you go there, you really perceive it's really Tibetic. You have all these, the way they eat tsampa, barley flour, the skew, everything. It's very similar. The chuli, the apricots, and all that. And at the same time, it's really Central Asiatic. You have this Central Asian
that flavor to it.
Flavor, and of course, people are mixed. And I think this gives a lot of beauty. The fact that this kind of diversity,
amalgamation.
Absolutely, yeah,
exactly. And so you've primarily been researching in languages.
Yeah,
but you also have other interests and
right. One of my recent, that's already been now, I'd say close to 10 years, is what we call eco-linguistics. Okay. So it is the way that, when you, the relationship between language and environment. So here you have an environment which is very harsh. Like in winter, Ladakh, a lot of Ladakhi go to Goa, but the reason is that there is no running water. You cannot have hot shower. You have to take a basin and go outside.
It's a lot of work.
Etc. So it's a difficult environment, but it's also there is such a beautiful environment with all the mountains and the incredible, like Senget-Sangpo, the Indus River, which is the mother of so many. It gives lives to millions of people through India, Pakistan, etc. And begins, of course, it has its source in Tibet as well. So the eco-linguistics means the language and the environment are somehow connected, especially in its lexical, in the vocab. So if you take some words, if you take the word nas, just barley. In English, it's not something fundamental. If you ask Americans or Europeans, to give them some words that are very important for their culture, certainly they would not come up with barley. Yeah. Or same with chumik, water spring. But here, these two words, for instance, are very, very important, and then it comes with the ideas of lalo, or as they would say in Shameria, which are the deities and the water spirits. So it shows that there is this ancestral belief that we should we should be very careful with the environment, Sachum, Melung, etc. That means the elements, the earth, the water, the fire, the air, etc. And there is this idea of keeping the thing pure, and etc. And this of course is conflicting with the new mentality, which is, of course, Ladakh is not different in a way nowadays from the entire
world,
where the money becomes a major and indeed the major religion, of course, and so that creates a lot of conflict, because there is a lot of destruction of the environment that is happening now. And of course, this happens with the fact that Indian Army is here, and if there wouldn't be Indian Army, of course, you wouldn't be Ladakhi, and you wouldn't be, belonging to India anymore. You would be Pakistanis, or you would be Chinese. Yeah. That's the thing. Thanks to the presence of this army, but at the same time, of course, it destroys so many things, because on the Siachen, everything, you've got army camps everywhere, and that's understandable. But at the same time, you have got to feed all this Sipai, to
it's taking its own kind of toll on the environment.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we need certain other safeguards, so to say,
Absolutely.
on how we can manage
Right.
such a presence in
Right.
such an ecologically,
Right.
fragile place. But I want to come back
Yeah.
to your initial,
Right.
point about this ancient wisdom, which you link with eco-linguistics.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you've been in South America, to
Right.
Peru.
Right.
You were with the Quechua people.
Yeah.
And personally, I see this connection between many indigenous cultures all over the world. And we are all, in some sense, tribal people, the whole world.
Sure.
And so what can these ancient traditions, wisdoms, and, practices teach us about ourselves? And
right. Well, I think we have basically to completely, if you change our kind of behavior very rapidly, because in a matter of 20 years in Ladakh, there might just be not enough water to, not talking even about the tourists, but to feed the people and the fields, for the fields, for watering the fields, etc. So I think it may be naive, but this kind of, this indigenous approach, this, I would say, ancestral approach was really to respect the element and to think that we cannot master the entire. We are, there are elements that are, that are stronger.
Beyond.
Yeah, of course. This is a place of a lot of Sangul earthquake.
Uh-huh.
For instance, in Turkey recently, you see, so we are so proud as human beings and it's true, we're being creating a lot of things collectively, all of us, collectively. But at the same time, we are, susceptible to disappear very rapidly if we are not careful. And the recent terrible earthquake in Turkey has shown how much,
destruction
you can. So the fact that, for instance, in Quechua, when I spent the entire winter in Huaraz, in Peru, in the Andes, at the same altitude as here, that is 3,000, nearly 500 meters. So, for instance, they have the tradition of the Yakumama, of the Apukuna, of the deities related also to water, and
just like here.
Very, very similar. So here, of course, the narrative, the way they explain it is a little bit different. But like, for instance, they say you should, literally sow water. They should store water and raise it like a child. So water in the Quechua conception is what does it mean? Raise the water and etc. They actually create traditionally ponds like zing would be, but they plant plant special trees around and all kind of herbs that purify the water, and they use also clay. And so after they kind of collect the water, there is the idea of collection the water, just as we harvest the field, they harvest the water. So I find it very interesting, but of course, like in our society, we use water for everything, for washing the car, just for the toilet, flushing the toilet. This is not going to last very long, I tell you. This kind of thing, and the water is the source of life. So this can be, seen as very naive and all that, but we have now to come back to very kind of, fundamental things. And the thing is, now we've become quite schizophrenic in a way. I went back to Ukraine. I studied in Ukraine 40 years ago, and I went back in October this year. And, apart from this terrible war, and I like both cultures, I like Russian culture and Ukrainian culture, it's a total disaster. But not only man-made disaster by the craziness, of this invasion, but not only, of course, first of all, for people who suffer and all that, but also for all the environment, the animals, the plants, the trees, the cereals. Now they've been a ban to actually really sell a lot of these cereals in Europe. They are contaminated. Of course, the contamination with this, of this war, this chemical weapon, because, even if there are conventional weapons, it's chemistry there. You have a lot of, so it's a total disaster. So on the one hand, we are talking about preserving the water, and the other hand, we are making bombing, making all this
chemically destroying the environment
completely. So personally, I think even if it's naive, I prefer to listen to the Quechua and to the Ladakhis and believe they're right, and believe that now there's a lot of project like they started SECMOL. There's all this passive solar stuff.
Yeah.
You can build in Ladakh instead of building this crazy auto concrete stuff in wrong orientation. You build with the local clay and local earth materials like yang and papu, etc. You can have passive solar. You barely need any heating, any bukare, any stove. It's really fantastic. And you could have running water all year long if you make insulation. So there is a lot of things now that some young people are doing in Ladakh, and I think it is not only good for Ladakh, it's good for the entire area and beyond. And I'm sure in Ukraine, when the war will be over, they will reconstruct it and try to follow this ecological model. Because if we don't follow that, I tell you, things are going to accelerate very rapidly. And I'm very concerned for the younger generations. But I'm sure, they will try to. We cannot go on in having one little cars and live the same way we have lived in Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and United States, and
in the West,
and not only East. Absolutely, because East-West, I absolutely don't believe
the globalized economy.
Chinese, United States,
you mean the
Russia,
global economy.
They live the same way. They have all the Russians, the Chinese, the Western European here, and the Americans. They live with their mobile phone, their little car. There's so little difference, and even the food, because here on the market, you can get any food you like. You want European food, you want Ladakhi food, you want Chinese food, you want Indian food, anything.
We'll take a break with this. Just a second. Okay. So thank you for your input right now, and I completely feel the same about the larger globalized economy and how it is kind of blindly leading rather the whole human race into a very monotonous, I don't know, industrial kind of life, which doesn't really align with our true selves as organic beings, so to say, and being part of, being part of this planet. But at the same time, we've had so much technological advances and so many other things that can be in sync, can be, imbibed in our way of living,
absolutely,
but without destroying or without putting the environment at peril.
I love science and technology, but they are not going to solve all our problems. We have to go for more contentment. The chokshes is called in Tibetan actually. More, definitely not only talking but really changing. Like I love to walk, and whenever I cannot use a car or anything, I really implement that. It's very important to implement this new and
minute small steps.
Absolutely, because we have now this way of life, which was, if we want to be very caricatural, we would say this American way of life now is nearly finished. I mean, it won't go for long. That's for sure.
Be the end of everything then if it keeps going like
exactly. Of course, this has spread to the entire world, in Africa, in
all continents, except because Antarctica and North Pole people can't live, so it's not.
Exactly.
Maybe it's going there. We don't know what's going behind those closed doors. But I want to, I want to come back to language, and I wanted to ask you about how, language can kind of come in for the younger people now, because all the younger people in Ladakh and maybe overall in the Himalayan region where these languages, Bhoti, and Tibetic languages exist,
Mhm.
they have cross-cultural exposure and they get influences from outside. And it's not like an outside-inside thing, but it's also the reality of this modern world. And there is this emphasis on going out and getting education and, so.
Right. So I think the language is a major issue because it's really the kind of basis of the rest of the culture. So for me, the languages are like, they are not vision of the world in terms of anybody who would be, let's say, an Inuit or from Papua New Guinea or from Ladakh or from France or from Patagonia would still see some object tables in a very similar way. Languages are more like, glasses with different focuses and different colors. So we see, when we put the glasses, we see the world, it's the same world, the same reality we see, but we see is a different color or different focus.
Prism. It's like
prism. Exactly. That's why I wrote a book which was called The Prism of Languages. And in English, it's called The Kaleidoscope of Languages. Not published yet in English, but it has been published twice in French. So languages are, in fact, we are so, embedded in languages because we talk all every day. I mean, apart from disabled people, language are within ourselves, and we talk to ourselves, we talk to people every day, all the time. And this, coming back to eco-linguistics, the world have a different, the affective dimension. So again, when we use several words, we have a different relationship, to the world, and it's, as I said, if I say, chuli here or apricot in English, that's the same word, but not. Because chuli here, you will do so many things of that. You will have so many expressions in Kargil, in Leh, everything about, the young apricot who have a flower, who just began to have a flower, Changdang, etc. So you will have, so nice expression, and then you make oil, you apply it to the face, etc., etc. So it's not only and dry apricots, it's not only food, it is the dimension of it, and of course the beauty, because we don't talk a lot about the aesthetics and the beauty of the people, but the beauty of the trees. Apricot flowers is such a spectacle in Ladakh in springtime. That's now just the poor apricot flowers have suffered a lot because they're cut on stock. There was a lot of, it was snowing 1 week ago. So but this is such a spectacle. Now, again, if we talk about apricots in many languages of the world, then it doesn't have this kind of dimension.
Character there.
Yeah. So a lot of words we're using, have a hidden, it's like an iceberg. It's a hidden affective dimension, and that connects to us. And, so in Ladakh, there are a number of, words and expression, not talking about tamspe or kaspe, but even simple words that relate to, like, I like one word, and I discussed that also in Peru, the word skitpu. The three stones.
Yeah.
And when, you've maybe done it, or your ancestors have done it, when you go outside, earlier, 50 years ago, take a zangbu.
It's like in picnics.
A pot, right? And you make the fire and you make the tea, because that's a survival issue. You go with the horses, you make that. But the gitpu is more than that. The gitpu is used, for instance, in some
our ancestors.
It is used for Buddhist ritual, etc. So when I discussed that with my Quechua friends in Huaraz, they talked about tulpa. Tulpa is the same equivalent, and they even have tulpa rahu, which is the name of a glacier. It's called the Sgitpu Glacier. And because it has the shape of the three stones. And so it's not only about three stones, it's about how to survive in the environment and how these three stones are a symbol of the stability and a symbol also of the fire, of the survival, etc. So and that's why it's used in the Buddhist ritual of the chut. Yeah. So there are so many things, like it looks like a detail, but it's not a detail.
Exactly. So this, I think, goes back to the core idea of how everything was connected to the environment.
Sure.
In these traditions.
Yeah.
Which is what we are losing at this point.
Absolutely.
And, so yeah, if we kind of get back to that, then we are going back to our real home,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Omer, you're
and
quite right.
I know that we're short on time. We're leaving tomorrow.
Sure.
But you're going to be back in October.
And
we're going to have a bigger,
sure, with pleasure,
interview or discussion, conversation. And my last question before you go would be about how do you, I know you've been in the field for more than 40 years now. And I've seen you over the years, like over the last 7 years personally, and your flame is still like, it's maybe, mine is not that much. You're still much older than me. My father's a friend of yours. And you're his age, but you're still like at it. What keeps you going?
Well, I think one thing is,
do you see a purpose, like a connection? Maybe it transcends this.
Well, I think, there's two things. One is I'm fascinated by there are terrible threats, but at the same time, there's fantastic things. Like we have now incredible music, directly accessible. We have the most, let's say, direct access to information that was never possible in the world before. And so this is something that is really incredible if we take the opportunity to use correctly, not the social network.
Using discernment.
Yeah, discernment. Discernment is absolutely it's a core issue. It's a core notion, and so that is one thing which is very important for me. And then it's linked also with the curiosity. I still have the same curiosity as when I was a teenager. And the second thing is, despite the fact that I saw terrible things, in the different countries where I was, China, in Soviet Union, but also in France, you would see, but I keep what, here they would say, the gawa, the skipo, or in Persian, shadi, in Hebrew, simcha, the joy.
The languages are coming out now, the 9 families that you've mastered.
Right. And so this is something very important, to keep this joy, to keep this flame. And when you feel, at peace with yourself, you feel much more connected with, other people, especially the people who are open-minded, and that is a real pleasure, because you can learn every day, and that's what I'm doing. I'm learning from you. I'm learning from all the people I meet, and that keeps me going. Yeah, absolutely.
The spirit of curiosity and learning.
Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, but so many good, important points came out. One of which personally I was, intrigued about was this bit about beauty that you spoke, because I see this, where we're kind of going into blind development where beauty is being ignored. These big buildings and things which are not beautiful and all that. And anyhow, we've been interrupted by this guy. Thank you so much, Nikolai, for your time, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mirza.
Even though you're short on time, you're leaving tomorrow. But I hope to see you again in October. We're going to have a proper, bigger interview with you. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Omer. See you soon.
Yeah.
До свидания.
Okay.